Hi, this is Jay Horowitz with a special edition of the Amazing Mental Online podcast. I'm proud to have Nelson George, who is the director of Say Hey Willie Mays, which is now streaming on HBO Max. I got to tell you, I was there at the premiere in November. I developed a friendship with Michael Mays, and you
Ah,
know, so before the film, we got a tip from Nick Trotta from MLB that hey, your guy's number retirement made at the end of the film. I got to tell you, you gave me a heart attack because I was waiting and waiting and waiting. And the film was great. Don't get me wrong, but there it was. I was really proud to have that at the end. You know, when I don't know if you know, I'm a diehard Willie Mays fan,
ah,
diehard. I remember in '54 watching the Vic Worth catch in my apartment, in Clifton. But so let me give you a
wow.
background how the number retirement started.
Sure.
I uh, when I used to travel, there was a PR guy with the Mets, and we were in San Francisco. And Rusty introduced me to Willie, and I met a lot of famous people my years here with the Mets. I was so nervous meeting him. He was my idol. He was very gracious, but so he would always see me at the BBWA meetings and say, "Jay, when are you guys going to tie my number?"
Ha ha
And
ha.
and so finally, we have this Hall of Fame committee. I went to Steve Cohen, our owner. I said, you know, um, when Willie was traded over here in '72, Joan Payson had promised him that his number would be retired, and it fell through the cracks. But
Mm.
thank God we got it done. And how much of the Payson stuff did you get into in the film
We
at
just we
all?
just mentioned we have footage of Joan and of Willie and her design. Willie tells a great story in the film about he kind of didn't want to come back. He had settled into
Right.
San Francisco, and that he talked to Miss Payson, and Miss Payson basically said he tried to make terms that which she'd have to turn down,
I
and she
remember
agreed
the
to
secret.
everything. And
Yeah.
so actually, it's interesting because we had finished the film. The film was completely finished when you guys retired the number, and I was like, "Is there any way this just happened? Like whatever it was on a weekend."
August, in August, late August.
So we're like, "Is there? Where can we slip this in the film?" And the only thing that made sense, we built this whole ending with Willie joking and talking over the credits, is that we can maybe squeeze it in right at the end. So it actually works out because you have all of that funny stuff Willie is saying, and he's kind of bantering with me, and then boom, you kind of ended on a perfect note of connecting the dots with
And
that
Howie
footage.
Rose, one of our radio guys, is a big Willie Mays fan. He was thrilled. I mean, I don't want to BS. We got a little flack for doing it. He only
Really,
played for a year and a half. He
right?
didn't do well. But my whole thing was, that wasn't the gist of his. It was what he meant to New York,
Exactly.
the oldest living Hall of Famer. There's so much more than that than a year and a half worth of stats. Don't you agree?
Yeah, Jay. Let me tell you, I'm a New York kid. I'm from Brooklyn.
Right.
I played stickball in Brooklyn my whole life. When Willie came back to New York, I was 14 or 15 years
Right.
old. That was like an atomic bomb had exploded in the city. The Daily News, Dick Young,
Right.
the columns to the Daily News, the coverage of that was amazing. Talk radio, there used to be talk radio shows. Um, it was a huge deal. And for me, then as an adolescent teenager, it was my opportunity to go. I think for a lot of my generation to go back and understand who Willie was in New York, and all my elders who were baseball fans. This his coming to New York was more than about just the Mets. It was
No
about
question.
closing the
100%.
circle when Major League Baseball, when National League Baseball had left New York. And he sort of brought those things together. And so
He hit 216. He dropped a fly ball in the sun in Oakland or a series. What are you
he didn't
doing?
drop the ball, as well as Reggie Jackson made clear. He didn't
Right.
drop the
Great
ball.
explanation.
Listen, in 72, he was still a very active player. He has good numbers
Co-
in 72. And he wanted to retire. He came back one more year because Joan Payson, really wanted him to come back. So, I mean, Willie coming back to New York was, um, I think it was an essential part of my childhood in terms of understanding the importance of him. And I think for our entire generation of baseball fans, that was full circle. The fact that they went back and played the World Series in Oakland, of all places, was so perfect.
We're joined by Colin Hanks. You're the producer, right, Colin, of Say Hey Willie Mays?
I am, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry to be tardy,
No,
guys.
no,
My
we were
apologies.
we were just talking about how the Mets were so thrilled. I was telling Nelson, diehard Willie Mays fan is my idol. We're so thrilled we were able to retire his number, and we're just so thrilled to have our little retirement thing part of your film. It just made a lot of people happy here in New York at City Field.
Well, I mean, let me tell you, it made this group of filmmakers absolutely overjoyed that we were able to include it. It's such a brilliant bookend to Willie's journey. And the fact that, all these years later, the Mets organization, followed through on their promise, I think is just speaks loads about, the club. And honestly, it's perfect. It really is perfect in every way.
And our ownership, when we presented it to him, Steve Cohen and his wife Alex, he said, "Why wouldn't you want to do it?" It's really just doing the right thing to do the right thing. It wasn't about
Correct.
stats. I was so proud. Let me ask you, how did you guys get Willie to do this? I mean, he really is Recluse so strong enough for it? I mean, he did the book with John Shea, which
Right.
I think cooperated with that, but really, he really hasn't didn't do a whole lot of stuff, right?
Well, Colin, you can talk about the chase. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. The chase is always the most fun, right? That's what they say. It's not necessarily true though. Yeah, look, it was a long process. My producing partner Sean Stewart, who was tireless on this project, just refused to sort of take no for an answer and went down every single road he possibly could to try and to get Willie involved. And it was a long process to get him to to take a meeting, and you got to have a series of other meetings before you're allowed to have that meeting to meet Willie. But quite honestly, once we had gotten pretty far downstream and really sort of being sort of showing our worth and how serious we were in our desire to help tell Willie's story. And I say that very specifically, to help tell his story. We're not telling his story, we are helping him tell his story. We were very fortunate to be able to head up to San Francisco to go meet Willie at the ballpark in his suite, where we kind of got to get to know each other. And I think that particular meeting was so integral to the whole process because of two things. A, we got to sort of pitch him on, what we believe is as a filmmaking team, which is we want to help tell his story. We're not in the business of messing up anyone's lives or legacies. And really sort of show him how genuine we were in in our wants. And also it gave him the opportunity to start trash talking Sean, our producer, which of course I love to no end, and Nelson did as well. And it gave Nelson the opportunity to speak with Willie, and I think instantly, everybody kind of just hit it off. And then from that moment on, it really is a testament to Nelson, not only as a filmmaker and as a documentary director, but also just as a person, that he was able to draw Willie out. Willie has spent his entire life being incredibly guarded, and for good reason. And I think Nelson did just a masterful job of really bringing out that personality. It's one of the hardest aspects of documentary films, is letting your subject feel comfortable enough to be able to come out of their shell. And Nelson was able to do that with Willie.
When in the film, I go back. I want to say what Cleon Jones told me. In the film, he stressed how he helped tutor Barry Bonds and he did the same thing with the Mets. He wasn't as vociferous as Jackie Robinson and some of the other guys, but Cleon told me stories that they never even would gotten to the World Series without his impact in the locker room, tuning the young pitchers, and he was the presence in the locker room. Maybe he didn't do anything to get on the first page of the papers, but he did it in his own special way. Wouldn't you agree, guys?
I may tell you, I mean, one of the real tragedies of the film is that Tom Seaver died,
Right.
while we were trying to get this thing done. And he had a very powerful relationship with Seaver. He brought that style of, I want to talk to the pitchers. I need to know what they're throwing so I can position the outfielders. He brought that to the Mets. He used to call Seaver Spanky, by the way. what Willie got from Seaver took with him when he went to the Cincinnati Reds and when he traveled. He took what Willie, and he talked about this in interviews, what Willie introduced him to in terms of being a pitcher, but also being aware of where the outfielders is and having that relationship with the entire field. That stuff that Willie taught him that he took with him the rest of his career.
Right.
And so there's so many different stories like that. It's a shame that, one of the tragedies of the film, unfortunately, is that Bob Gibson, Tom Seaver, Hank Aaron, there's a lot of folks who passed.
Ed Kranepool still maintains a good relationship with Willie as a Cleon. Um, h- how is I again I speak to Michael. I'm disclosing secrets, but his health is better, same. I mean, what would your character? He was very outspoken in the film, with good sense of humor and everything.
I mean, I challenge you to find a man his age in as good a health as he is. I mean, he's the man's a specimen as far as I'm concerned. Yeah.
Jay, the hands of Willie Mays, which are kind of a big visual thread in the
Right.
film, we show it very early on, and then it kind of with him basically squeezing my hand to death. That is one of his things. He's 90 something years old. His hands are still powerful. His presence is still powerful. His sense of humor is completely intact. He's an incredible. Just to be in his presence, quite honestly, there's an aura the dude has that he's had forever, and it's still there.
I forget.
Yeah.
Did you speak to him about the Praise and Promise? I know it was mentioned because he always told me that it was really important to him. And when we conveyed that it was done through Michael, I think he was generally excited about it. Because not too many players have their
Right.
numbers retired at two different places, right? And
Michael was crucial to the film because not only getting Michael doesn't do press either. So it was hard to get Michael. It took me a year and a half of tech. And also, I think he was very important to getting Barry. Once he had sat down with us and felt comfortable, he says, and I believe he did, talk to Barry and said, co-sign, these guys are okay. Colin and Sean and Nelson are not going to try and screw you over. They're about the storytelling of my father, and they respect him. So Michael was a crucial piece of the film in so many ways.
how many days did it take to put this film together?
Well, we had 2 days of on camera with Willie, and we did 1 day of just audio with Willie. So we had 3 full days with Willie, and then we traveled all over. We went to Dominican Republic to talk to Ozzie Virgil, who was fantastic. Miami, where Marshall lives. We spent time in Birmingham, Alabama. So we shot all over the place, really. L.A., New York.
Can I digress for 1 second? Nelson, you from Brownsville, right? Brooklyn. Good. Willie Randolph is a good friend of mine.
Oh man, come on, man.
Willie, the one thing that kind of bothers me, he retired whenever he got fired from the Mets, 536 winning percentage. For the life of me, cannot understand why he hasn't got another job anyplace. I mean, he's a great baseball mind, knows the game. It's really bothers me for years and years, that he's never got another chance.
Let me, man, you're going to break my heart with that. I just talked to him recently. I grew up in the same block. We played stickball together.
Right.
He hit one of the longest stickball home runs I've ever given up. Put it this way, he hit it to the 16th floor in the projects.
We're exchanging stickball history now. I love it.
It's real New York shit, man.
I love it.
Willie is one of my, it pains me so much that he hasn't got a shot again. It really has. Tremendous guy. I remember going to visit him when he managed the Mets, and he had the Jackie Robinson jersey up in his office. He really, it was one of the tragedies to me. And another thing, and for some reason, when we were doing the interviews in New York, I could never get a hold of Willie. I really wanted him to be in the film, and it didn't quite work out.
It really is.
Great baseball player, a winner at every level. Played for the Yankees and the Mets.
The captain of the Yankees, good man. In my mind, the Vic Wertz catch is always the best catch. Then I saw in the movie when he almost killed Bobby Bonds to make that catch. I mean, which one do you think is? I mean, is it hard to categorize him, or I mean?
But I was a kid getting at 70 whatever 70 just before he left. It's 71 or 72, I think. I was watching that game at home on NBC Game of the Week, and it just stuck with me for years. Like, wow, what catch! And it's so funny because I had no idea that Barry Bonds was there. So I just brought it up in the interview, and then he went into a huge thing about how that was a better catch than the catch in '54. And just in terms of the physical nature of it, the fact that he crashes into Bobby, crashes into the wall. He kind of leaps up like it's amazing. He flies through the air to catch this ball and held on to it when he crashed to the ground. I think as a physical act, it's probably more impressive than '54. If not, maybe not as important a game, but in terms of the physicality.
In '64, the Mets and Giants played a 32 inning doubleheader, which I was at, rooting for the Giants. I became a Met fan on April 1st, 1980, when I joined the Mets. And that game, Willie Mays played shortstop. And I think Gaylord Perry pitched the last 10 innings of the game.
No, we could. Listen, I mean, the problem with the film is that it's not a Wikipedia page, unfortunately.
Right.
We couldn't get everything that Willie did in there. There's so much stuff. Our original idea, and Colin can co-sign this, was to do like a 4-hour film.
Yeah.
And there's stuff in there that really we just couldn't get in. I mean, we had a whole section earlier on the game where Marshall goes up against Orange Spawn.
The 16 inning game, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that was a whole section. We had another section on the Roseboro Marshall fight. So there's a lot of stuff that just because of time we couldn't get in.
Is it true that San Francisco really didn't welcome Willie with open arms in the beginning? It was a DiMaggio town, and it took him a while to get acclimated. I mean, how true is that scenario?
Well, what's interesting is that was true. I mean, in fact, it was one of the papers back then there were multiple dailies, and one of the papers in town, I don't know which one, really didn't like Willie. And so there's a whole narrative where I think the Chronicle was pro Willie and one of the other papers was anti Willie. And that became sort of a tabloid battle.
When I was a traveling PR guy with the Mets, and Bob Appitek and Rusty Staub introduced me to Willie. He's always been so gracious, with me. When I see him at dinners, he knows I'm a big fan. But listen, guys, I want to thank you for doing this. So, still streaming HBO Max.
Absolutely.
I've seen it about 5 times already, guys.
Love you, Jay.
I told Nelson I was at the premiere. Compliments to Michael. I was there, thrilled, and I was waiting. I wish you would have shown the retirement sooner. He was about to have a heart attack. Okay, Nick Trotter told me they're going to use the retirement thing. Well, when is it? When is it? I said, thank God, there it was.
You're the closer, man. Jay, you're the closer.
No, I know. It was great. I mean, and all right. Listen, I appreciate you guys, man. Thank you. It's a great film. You see it, all Met fans, Giant fans, baseball fans. Say hey, Willie Mays, HBO Max streaming right now.